I pulled into the cracked driveway, the sun dipping behind the hills of Millfield, Texas, casting long, jagged shadows over the quiet tree-lined street. The cold December air had a sharp bite creeping through the gaps in my car's worn-out weather stripping, making my hands ache against the steering wheel. I cut the engine and sat there for a moment, the tick of the cooling engine filling the silence. I glanced at the small cake box on the passenger seat, $15 vanilla frosting, happy birthday, scrawled in slightly crooked red icing. It felt absurdly small, but it was the only thing I had bothered to get for myself this year. As I stepped out, the frost-laden grass crunched beneath my boots, each step echoing in the empty street. I reached for the cake, the flimsy plastic handle of the box digging into my fingers. I closed the car door a little too hard, the sound startling a pair of crows from the neighbor's tree, their wings beating furiously as they scattered into the bruised evening sky. The house stood before me, its pale peeling paint and crooked shutters, a silent reminder of everything I'd held together for the past 5 years. I paid the mortgage, the utility bills, the insurance. I had poured thousands into this place, keeping the lights on and the heat running, yet it never felt like mine. Not really, it was Adam and Laura's house, and I was just a temporary guest, an ungrateful one if you asked them. I pushed open the front door, the rusty hinges groaning like a tired old man. Inside, the house felt colder than the air outside, a damp, musty chill clinging to the walls. The kitchen lights buzzed overhead, casting everything in a harsh yellow glow. Dinner was already on the table: meatloaf, canned green beans, and instant mashed potatoes, the same sad routine meal we had shared 1,000 times. I set the cake down on the counter, the bag crinkling loudly in the silence. I hadn't even taken off my coat when I heard Adam's voice from the dining room. "You're late." His tone was sharp, tinged with the familiar edge of disappointment. I hung my coat on the old wooden hook by the door, the cold leather creaking as it slipped from my shoulders. "I had to finish up some reports at work," I replied, my voice flat, deliberately void of apology. I stepped into the dining room, the clink of Laura's fork against her plate the only other sound. She didn't look up, just kept her head down, her thin, gray-streaked hair falling over her face like a curtain. Adam grunted, his hand already reaching for the whiskey bottle beside his plate, the glass still streaked with yesterday's fingerprints. I took my seat at the end of the table, the chair creaking under my weight. For a few minutes, we ate in a heavy, suffocating silence, the only sounds the clatter of cutlery and the occasional forced cough. No happy birthday, no small talk, just the mechanical rhythm of chewing and swallowing. I pushed a clump of potatoes around my plate, my appetite already dead. Halfway through his meal, Adam slammed his fork down, the sharp clang making me flinch despite myself. He leaned back in his chair, his eyes narrowing as they locked onto mine. "You're too old to be freeloading," he said, his voice cold and deliberate. "It's time you left." The words hung in the air, sharp and unforgiving. I stared at him, my mind struggling to process what I had just heard. I glanced at Laura, hoping for some contradiction, a shake of her head, a whispered protest, anything. But she kept her eyes down, her lips pressed together into a thin, bloodless line, her fork frozen in midair. "I pay the mortgage," I said, my voice steady, each word carefully measured. "The electricity, the water, the insurance on your truck." My heart pounded in my chest, a slow, heavy thud that echoed in my ears. "I've covered more bills in this house than either of you for the past 5 years. Adam barked, a short, harsh laugh, the kind that felt more like a slap than a sound. "Paying a few bills doesn't buy you a lifetime stay, kid." His words cut deeper than I cared to admit. The nickname he used to call me when I was young, when I used to climb into his lap with scraped knees and a head full of dreams, now twisted into a weapon. I swallowed hard, feeling something crack deep inside me, something that had been slowly fracturing for years. This wasn't a spontaneous outburst. It was planned, rehearsed, maybe even agreed upon over one of their whispered kitchen conversations when they thought I was still asleep. They had waited for today, my birthday, to drop this final calculated blow. I pushed my chair back slowly, the legs scraping against the worn linoleum with a low grating sound. I met Adam's gaze, his eyes bloodshot and unflinching, the whiskey fumes clinging to his breath like a sour fog. "Got it," I said, my voice flat, final. I stood, the weight of their betrayal pressing against my chest like a physical thing choking the air from my lungs. I walked back to the kitchen, my boots thudding against the scuffed floorboards. The cake still sat on the counter, the thin plastic handle stretched tight, a single red candle missing from the package. It felt symbolic somehow. One candle missing, one person missing, one family gone. I grabbed the box and headed for the stairs, each step creaking under my weight, loud and accusing. I reached my room and closed the door behind me, leaning against it as the finality of their words crashed over me. I set the cake down on my desk, staring at the crooked red icing through the plastic window. Happy birthday. The words felt like a mockery now, a cruel joke scrawled in sugar and flour. I sank onto the edge of my bed, my hands trembling as I reached for my phone. The notification light blinked in the dark, a small persistent reminder of the outside world. But I didn't check it. I couldn't. Not yet. Because tonight I had finally been cut loose. And for the first time in years, I had no idea what came next. I sat on the edge of my bed, the cold air seeping through the thin walls, pressing against my skin like a reminder of every winter I had kept this place warm. 5 years. 5 years of carrying this family on my back, of stretching every paycheck to cover not just my expenses, but theirs as well. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees, staring at the cake on my desk. The small crooked letters on the frosting taunted me, a $15 token of a birthday no one had bothered to remember. My mind drifted back to the countless sacrifices I had made to keep this house standing, to keep Adam and Laura from drowning in their own debts. There was the winter 3 years ago when the power had gone out for 2 days. Adam had forgotten to pay the electric bill. Again. I came home from my second job, my fingers stiff from the cold, to find them huddled in the living room, bundled under layers of blankets, the air in the house frigid and bitter. Laura's face had been pale, her hands trembling as she clutched her teacup, her eyes flicking to the darkened ceiling fan like it might somehow come back to life on its own. I had pulled out my phone, transferred the balance, and watched the lights flicker back on within the hour. Adam had muttered something about the power company being a ripoff, then cracked open a beer without so much as a glance in my direction. I had paid that bill every month since the memory of their shivering figures etched into my mind like a scar. Then there was the time Laura had called me from the side of the highway, her old sedan belching smoke like a dying dragon. I had dropped everything, left work, skipped a meeting, to drive 40 miles in a freezing rainstorm to pick her up. I had paid for the tow, the repairs, even the new set of tires that she had needed but never bothered to replace. And then there were the smaller daily sacrifices. Groceries, gas, the occasional hospital bill when Adam's back flared up from years of manual labor. I had handed over my paychecks without a second thought, convinced that family meant sacrifice, that my worth was measured in the bills I could cover and the problems I could solve. But that night, as I sat in my small, cluttered bedroom, the dull ache in my chest spread, tightening around my ribs like a slowly coiling vine. I realized, maybe for the first time, that I had been mistaken. Family shouldn't feel like a transaction. It shouldn't weigh you down until you can barely breathe, until every step feels like a desperate push against the weight of unspoken debts. I pushed myself up the springs of the old mattress, creaking in protest. I moved to the small cluttered desk by the window, the one I had crammed against the wall to make space for the boxes I had never bothered to unpack. I powered on my laptop, the screen flickering to life with a soft mechanical hum. My hands hovered over the keyboard, the cursor blinking in time with the rapid thud of my heart. I pulled up my banking app, the joint account I had set up years ago, back when I had naively believed that sharing meant caring, that my sacrifices would one day be acknowledged, maybe even appreciated. I scrolled through the transactions, the long list of payments and transfers stretching back for years. Electricity, water, gas, groceries, even their car insurance, all in my name, all pulled from my account. I felt a slow burn rising in my chest, a mix of anger and exhaustion that tightened my grip on the mouse. I clicked over to the utilities portal, my fingers trembling slightly. The account was mine, the payments automated from my checking account. A small convenience I had set up without a second thought, never imagining it would one day become my own noose. I took a deep breath, the cold air settling in my lungs like shards of glass. My mind raced, 1,000 small injustices flashing before my eyes. Every time I had handed over my last few dollars for groceries, every sleepless night spent worrying about whether I could stretch my paycheck just a little further to cover their mounting debts. I hovered over the cancel button, my heart pounding in my ears. I thought of Adam's smirk at the dinner table, his dismissive wave as he had barked at me to leave, the way Laura had kept her head down, too weak or too indifferent to speak up in my defense. My finger tightened on the mouse, and then with a sharp final click, I severed the first of many invisible threads that had kept me bound to this house, this family, this slow, suffocating existence. Electric bill canceled, water bill canceled, gas bill canceled, internet disconnected, auto insurance removed. Each click felt like a hammer blow, driving a wedge between me and the life I had outgrown, the life that had outgrown me. I felt a strange, bitter satisfaction as the confirmation screens flickered past each one, a small whispered promise of freedom. I closed the laptop, the faint glow of the screen lingering in my eyes as I leaned back in my chair, the weight in my chest easing just a fraction. Outside, the wind whispered against the windows, rattling the loose panes with a sound like distant, ghostly applause. I stood moving to the window, my breath fogging the glass as I peered out into the darkened street. The bare branches of the old oak in the front yard swayed in the cold wind, the last of its leaves torn away by the early winter storms. I watched as a single stubborn leaf clung to a lower branch, shivering in the wind, but refusing to let go. It would fall eventually. They always did. But not tonight. Not yet. The house felt different the next morning, colder, emptier, as if the walls themselves had sensed the shift. I stepped out of my room, the old floorboards creaking beneath my weight, each step a quiet reminder of the years I had spent walking on eggshells in my own home. I moved down the stairs slowly, my fingers trailing along the chipped banister, the worn wood cool against my skin. The kitchen was silent, the overhead light flickering slightly as I stepped inside. The table was still littered with the remnants of last night's dinner, crusted plates, half-empty glasses, a crumpled paper napkin stained with whiskey. Adam's chair was pushed back at an awkward angle, the glass he had slammed down still perched precariously on the edge of the table. I stood there for a moment, my eyes tracing the familiar lines of the worn linoleum, the faded floral wallpaper, the dented refrigerator door covered in old grocery lists and yellowing coupons. This place had never been mine, I realized. It had always been theirs, a crumbling shrine to their stubbornness, their failures, their inability to let go of a past that no longer existed. I reached for the small cake box I had abandoned on the counter the night before. The plastic handle had left deep indentations in the cardboard, the cheap red icing inside smeared against the clear plastic window. I lifted it carefully, the box feeling absurdly light in my hands, and carried it to the trash can by the back door. I hesitated for a moment, my fingers tightening around the thin, crinkling handle. Then, without a second thought, I dropped it into the trash, the soft thud of the box against the plastic liner echoing in the empty kitchen. I let the lid fall shut with a hollow, final clunk. I turned my eyes, catching on the old landline phone hanging on the wall by the fridge, its coiled cord twisted and frayed from years of use. It had been silent for days, the line cut off by the unpaid bill I had finally let lapse. I felt a brief, sharp pang of guilt, quickly followed by a deeper, colder sense of relief. Let them deal with the consequences. For once I thought, my jaw tightening as I crossed the room to the sink. I turned the faucet, watching as a thin trickle of water sputtered out, then slowed to a weak, trembling stream. The water bill had been the first to go, the account closed with a single satisfying click the night before. I reached for a glass, filling it slowly, the cool, metallic-tasting water splashing against the sides. I drank deeply, the cold liquid sliding down my throat like a bitter, refreshing reminder of everything I had finally let go. I set the empty glass on the counter, the dull clink echoing in the quiet kitchen. As I straightened, my eyes caught on the old faded calendar hanging beside the fridge, the days of the month marked with Laura's neat, looping handwriting. Doctor's appointments, haircuts, reminders to pay the phone bill. My birthday had been circled in red, the word Mika scrawled beside it in small, hesitant letters. I felt a bitter smile tug at the corners of my mouth as I reached up and tore the page from the calendar, the thin paper crumpling in my fist as I turned and tossed it into the trash can beside the cake box. I was halfway to the front door when I heard the dull thud of footsteps behind me, the familiar shuffling gait of someone too tired or too hungover to care about making a scene. I turned slowly, my fingers still curled around the cold metal of the doorknob, and met Adam's bleary, bloodshot gaze. "What the hell are you doing?" He slurred, his voice rough with sleep and whiskey. He leaned heavily against the doorframe, his bare, calloused feet pressing into the cool tile, his hands trembling slightly as he rubbed at his stubbled jaw. I straightened, my hand still on the doorknob, my heart pounding in my chest. I had expected this, the confrontation, the backlash, but I hadn't expected it so soon. Hadn't expected the tight, seething anger that tightened his features, the barely contained rage that flickered in his bloodshot eyes. "Leaving?" I said, my voice steady, the word falling from my lips like a stone dropped into a deep, dark well. "Just like you asked." He stared at me for a long moment, his jaw working silently, his eyes narrowing as he took a stumbling step forward. "You think you're just going to walk out of here?" He spat, his words sharp and slurred. "After everything we've done for you, after all the sacrifices we've made." I felt a sharp, bitter laugh rise in my throat, the sound bursting from my lips before I could stop it. Sacrifices. I repeated, my voice rising, the sharp edge of my anger cutting through the cold, stale air. You mean the years I spent paying your bills, covering your debts, keeping this house from falling apart while you drank yourself into oblivion? Adam's face flushed a deep, angry red, his fists clenching at his sides, his body swaying slightly as he took another step toward me. You ungrateful little, he began, his voice rising, his words slurring together into a tangled, drunken snarl. I stepped back, my hand tightening on the doorknob, the cool metal pressing into my palm. No, I said, my voice firm, my heart pounding in my chest. Not this time. I'm done. I turned, pulling the door open with a sharp final tug, the cold morning air rushing in, swirling around my legs, cutting through the stifling heat of the kitchen. I stepped over the threshold, my boots thudding against the cracked concrete of the front porch, the rough, weathered surface grinding against the soles of my shoes. I took a deep breath, the cold air burning in my lungs, my eyes stinging as I blinked against the harsh early morning light. I felt the door slam shut behind me, the sharp crack echoing down the quiet, empty street. I didn't look back. The wind whipped through my hair as I stepped off the porch, the cold air biting into my skin like tiny, invisible needles. I reached my car, my hands trembling as I fumbled for the keys. My heart still pounded in my chest, the adrenaline from my confrontation with Adam coursing through my veins like a fever. I slid into the driver's seat, my fingers stiff as I gripped the wheel. I took a deep breath, my lungs burning with the cold metallic air, and turned the key in the ignition. The old engine coughed to life, the dashboard lights flickering weakly before settling into a steady, reassuring glow. I threw the car into reverse, the tires crunching over the gravel as I backed out of the driveway, the house growing smaller in my rearview mirror with each passing second. I didn't know where I was going. I had no plan, no destination, just a deep, aching need to get as far away from that house as possible. I took a sharp left at the end of the street, the tires skidding slightly on the icy pavement, and sped down the winding, tree-lined road that led out of Millfield. The highway stretched out before me, the dark asphalt cutting through the barren, frost-covered fields like a scar. I leaned back in my seat, my knuckles white against the steering wheel, my mind racing with 1,000 tangled thoughts. I had done it. I had finally walked away. But as the miles rolled by, the initial rush of adrenaline began to fade, replaced by a dull, throbbing ache that settled in my chest like a stone. I had left, but what now? Where would I go? What would I do? I had spent so long taking care of everyone else, holding their lives together, that I had forgotten how to live my own. I glanced at my phone, the screen dark and silent in the cup holder beside me. I hadn't bothered to check my messages, hadn't thought to tell anyone I was leaving. Who would I have called anyway? My few remaining friends had drifted away over the years, their patience slowly worn down by my endless excuses, my inability to break free from the toxic cycle I had allowed myself to become trapped in. I hit the gas, the engine whining in protest as I sped down the empty highway, the cold wind whistling through the cracked window on the passenger side. I felt a bitter smile tug at the corners of my mouth as I thought of Adam's face, the way his eyes had bulged, his jaw clenched in furious disbelief as I had walked out the door. Good. I thought, my fingers tightening on the wheel. Let him stew in his anger. Let him choke on his own pride. Let him try to explain to Laura why the lights had gone out, why the water had stopped running, why the insurance on his truck had been canceled. Let them face the reality I had shielded them from for so long. I drove for hours, the dark highway stretching out before me like an endless frozen river, the white lines flickering past in a hypnotic blur. I had no destination, no plan, just a vague, desperate need to keep moving, to put as much distance between myself and that house as possible. Eventually, as the first light of dawn began to creep over the horizon, I found myself pulling into the gravel lot of a small roadside motel, the flickering neon sign casting a pale, ghostly glow over the cracked, potholed pavement. I parked beside a rusted pickup truck, the hood covered in a thin layer of frost, and sat there for a moment, the engine ticking as it cooled my breath, fogging up the windshield. I reached for my phone, my fingers stiff and cold as I tapped at the screen, pulling up my contacts. I hesitated, my thumb hovering over Lydia's name. She had been my one true friend, the one person who had always been there for me, even when I had pushed her away, even when I had chosen my family's comfort over my own happiness. I hit the call button, the phone ringing in my ear, each tone a sharp, painful reminder of the distance I had allowed to grow between us. I held my breath, my heart pounding in my chest as the call connected, the line crackling slightly before her familiar, sleepy voice broke through the static. "Mika," she mumbled, her voice thick with sleep and confusion. It's 6 in the morning. What's going on?" I hesitated, my throat tightening as 1,000 half-formed explanations rushed through my mind, each one more inadequate than the last. I closed my eyes, my head falling back against the cold, cracked leather of the headrest, and let out a long, shaky breath. "I left," I said, finally, the words tumbling from my lips in a breathless, desperate whisper. "I left them. I walked out. I'm done." There was a long, heavy silence on the other end of the line, the faint rustle of sheets the only sound as Lydia processed my words. I heard her sit up, the creak of the mattress loud in the quiet of the motel parking lot. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice suddenly sharp, the last traces of sleep vanishing as the weight of my words sank in. "Where are you? Do you need me to come get you?" I felt a small, tight knot of tension unwind in my chest, the first tentative flicker of relief I had felt in years. "I'm fine," I lied, my voice trembling slightly as I glanced around the empty parking lot, the neon motel sign flickering above my head like a distant dying star. I just needed to hear your voice. I needed to know I wasn't alone." Lydia let out a long, slow breath, the faint crackle of the phone line filling the silence between us. "You're not alone, Mika," she said finally, her voice low and firm, each word a small steadying anchor in the swirling chaos of my mind. "You never were. You just forgot that for a while." I closed my eyes, the sting of tears prickling behind my eyelids, and leaned back against the cool, cracked leather of the headrest. For the first time in what felt like forever, I allowed myself to breathe, to hope, to imagine a future beyond the cracked, crumbling walls of that house. "I'm here," Lydia continued, her voice warm and steady in my ear. "Whatever you need, whenever you need it, just say the word." I nodded, my throat too tight to speak, my fingers gripping the cold, cracked leather of the steering wheel as the first tentative rays of sunlight crept over the horizon, painting the dark, empty highway in shades of gold and silver. I had left. I had finally truly left, and for the first time in years, I felt free. The days that followed felt like a slow exhale, the kind you take after holding your breath for far too long. I had found refuge in Lydia's small apartment on the edge of town, a cramped but cozy space filled with mismatched furniture and the faint, comforting scent of lavender and vanilla. She had cleared a corner of her spare bedroom for me, pushing aside stacks of old textbooks and half-filled journals to make space for my hastily packed bags. The first night I barely slept, my mind still buzzing with the echoes of Adam's anger, the harsh finality of my exit replaying in my head like a broken record. I lay on the small, lumpy mattress Lydia had dragged out of her closet, staring at the ceiling as the hours crept by, the faint hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen, the only sound in the otherwise silent apartment. The morning came pale and gray, the weak winter sunlight filtering through the thin, yellowing curtains. I stumbled into the kitchen, my eyes gritty with exhaustion, and found Lydia already awake, a steaming mug of coffee in one hand, her laptop open on the cluttered counter. She glanced up as I entered, her eyes bright with concern, the dark circles under them a silent testament to the worry she had carried for me for years. "Morning," she said, her voice soft, careful as if afraid a sudden noise might send me retreating back into my shell. She pushed a second mug toward me, the chipped ceramic warm against my cold, trembling fingers. I sank onto one of the wobbly bar stools, wrapping my hands around the cup as I took a slow, tentative sip. The coffee was bitter, strong enough to strip the lining from my throat, but I welcomed the harsh, grounding sensation, the slow, steady warmth that spread through my chest as I swallowed. We sat in silence for a while, the only sounds the soft clink of Lydia's spoon against her mug, the quiet hum of the radiator in the corner. Finally, she set her cup down, her fingers tapping a slow, nervous rhythm against the chipped tile of the counter. So she said, her voice deliberately casual, her eyes flicking to mine before quickly darting away. "What's the plan?" I stared into my coffee, the dark liquid swirling slowly in my cup, my mind blank, my thoughts a tangled mess of half-formed fears and unanswered questions. I had no plan, no job, no apartment, no savings. I had spent years pouring every penny I had into that house, into Adam and Laura's endless debts, into a life that had never really been mine. "I don't know," I admitted, my voice low, my eyes still fixed on the dark, swirling surface of my coffee. "I don't know what comes next." Lydia nodded slowly, her fingers still tapping against the counter, the sharp staccato rhythm, a stark contrast to the slow, steady thud of my heart. "That's okay," she said, her voice firm, steady, each word a small steadying anchor in the storm of my thoughts. "You don't have to have it all figured out right now. Just take it one step at a time." I looked up, my eyes meeting hers, the warmth and certainty in her gaze cutting through the fog of my fear, the suffocating weight of my uncertainty. For the first time in what felt like years, I felt a small, flickering spark of hope, a tiny tentative light in the darkness. That day, I forced myself to do the small practical things I had been avoiding for years. I set up a new bank account, one with only my name on it, free from the joint account I had shared with Adam and Laura for so long. I updated my direct deposit information at work, my fingers shaking as I filled out the online form, the realization that my money was now truly mine, a strange heady rush. I canceled the auto-pay on their remaining bills, the accounts I had forgotten to close in my initial rush to sever the ties that bound me to that house. I deleted their numbers from my phone one by one, each name a small painful reminder of the life I had finally left behind. The days stretched into weeks, the small cluttered apartment slowly beginning to feel like home, the tight suffocating knot in my chest loosening with each passing day. I found a job at a local cafe, the hours long, the pay barely enough to cover my share of the rent, but the work was simple, the routine comforting in its predictability. Lydia was my constant, her steady unflinching support, the one thing that kept me from sinking back into the dark suffocating hole of doubt and regret that threatened to swallow me whole. She pushed me to get out, to reconnect with old friends, to reclaim the parts of myself I had buried beneath years of self-sacrifice and silent suffering. Then one rainy Thursday afternoon, the knock came. I opened the door, my heart leaping into my throat at the sight of the uniformed officer standing on the small water-stained welcome mat, a thick manila envelope clutched in one gloved hand. He held it out to me, his face impassive, his eyes carefully avoiding mine. "You've been served," he said, his voice flat, mechanical, as if he had delivered the same line 1,000 times before. He turned and disappeared down the hallway, his footsteps echoing off the chipped, peeling walls, leaving me standing there, the cold, damp envelope heavy in my trembling hands. I closed the door slowly, my back pressing against the cool, solid wood as I sank to the floor, the envelope slipping from my grasp, the thick, crinkling paper crackling loudly in the small, silent apartment. I stared at it for a long moment, my mind racing, my heart pounding in my chest, 1,000 half-formed fears swirling through my mind. I reached for it slowly, my fingers trembling as I tore open the flap, the sharp, bitter scent of cheap ink and cheap paper filling my nose as I pulled out the neatly folded pages inside. My eyes skimmed the small, densely packed text, the cold, impersonal language of the legal document, cutting into me like 1,000 tiny, paper-thin blades. Adam and Laura were suing me for financial abandonment, for theft, for emotional distress. The words blurred on the page, my breath catching in my throat, my heart hammering against my ribs as the reality of their betrayal crashed over me like a cold, suffocating wave. I felt the old familiar anger flare in my chest, the tight, bitter heat spreading through my veins as I clutched the papers in my shaking hands. They had taken everything from me, my time, my money, my peace of mind, and now they were trying to take even more. But this time I wouldn't let them. I had come too far, fought too hard, sacrificed too much to let them drag me back into the darkness. I would stand my ground, I would fight, and this time I would win. Story 2. My name is Elena. I'm 23, just graduated with a finance degree and landed a job at a major firm back in my hometown. I should have been celebrating. Instead, I came home to a lock that wouldn't turn and a stepmother who acted like I was trespassing in my own house. This wasn't just any house. This was my mother's house, the home she bought years before marrying my dad, the home I grew up in, the home she left to me after cancer took her away 4 years ago. Mom was always meticulous. When she got her diagnosis, she made sure her affairs were handled. The will was clear. Everything, especially the house, was left to me. She even told me herself with that firm tone of hers that made you believe anything she said. "You'll always have a home, Elena, no matter what." That home, though, became something very different after she passed. When Mom died, I was 19, emotionally wrecked, and days away from moving to another state for college. I don't remember much of that summer except the grief and the surprise. My dad, who divorced my mom when I was 10, moved in with his new wife Vanessa and their daughter Mia to help me through it. At the time, I was grateful for the support. Dad said they'd only stay a little while until I got settled at school. He even suggested they stay in the house while I was away so it wouldn't sit empty. "We'll pay the bills, keep the place running. You won't have to worry about a thing," he promised one morning over pancakes. Vanessa smiled like it was the most reasonable thing in the world. "It's good for Mia, too. She's finally adjusting to her school." So I agreed. I packed up for college, trusting that my family would respect my mother's home the same way I did. Over the next 4 years, I came home for holidays and summers. At first, it was fine. Vanessa made an effort. She'd cook big meals when I came back, and Mia, my half-sister, started to treat me less like a visitor and more like a sibling. Sometimes it even felt like a real family. But there were changes. Quiet ones. Furniture moved, decor updated, pictures of Mom were shifted into less noticeable corners. It was subtle, but I noticed. Still, I stayed quiet. After all, I was only home a few times a year, and I didn't want to stir up conflict. My focus was on school. I had a full ride thanks to the college fund Dad had set up long ago, and I wanted to make my mom proud. Fast forward to this summer. I graduated with honors, got a job offer from a reputable financial firm back in town, and was ready to come home and start my new chapter. The plan was simple: move back into my house, settle in, and start working in 3 weeks. So imagine my surprise when my key didn't work. Vanessa answered the door, confused and flustered. "Elena, what are you doing here?" "I live here," I said, dragging my suitcase inside. "I told you I was moving back after graduation. The job starts in a few weeks." Dad and Mia were on the couch. Neither looked thrilled to see me. Something felt off. Later that evening, Dad pulled me into the study. That's when the truth spilled out. He'd never told Vanessa the house was mine. He'd lied, said the house was his, and that I was just living here temporarily because of sentiment. Vanessa thought he let me stay out of pity. 4 years of silence, and he'd allowed his wife to believe I was a guest in my own home. I was stunned, furious, betrayed. But when I tried to confront her, Dad stopped me. "Just give me time," he begged. "Let me figure out how to explain everything." He handed me the new keys and swore he'd fix it. But that promise didn't hold up. In the days that followed, things got tense. Vanessa barely acknowledged me. Mia avoided me altogether. I was the outsider now, an unwelcome presence in a house that used to be filled with love and memories. Vanessa started making comments. "You're working now. Have you started looking for your own place? We really need to update the living room. It's too old-fashioned." She moved my mom's vase into the garage, accidentally shrunk my sweaters in the laundry, made dinner for 3 instead of 4. Mia joined in too. No more long talks, no more laughs, just eye rolls and cold shoulders. I kept quiet. I focused on preparing for my job, reconnecting with old friends, and staying out of their way. Then one weekend I woke up and the house was empty. No car in the driveway, no noise, no note, just gone. I called my dad, voicemail. Called Vanessa, she picked up. "Oh, right, we're in the Bahamas for 2 weeks. Forgot to tell you," she said, laughing. Then her tone changed. "Honestly, Elena, it's embarrassing. A grown woman still mooching off her father, living in a house you didn't pay for." I was stunned. "This is my house. Please, you've been freeloading for years. Your father just doesn't have the heart to tell you." The call ended with a threat. "When we're back, I want you gone. You've overstayed your welcome." She hung up before I could respond. I sat there for a long time, seething, the audacity of it all. They'd lived in my house, eaten my food, rearranged my mother's belongings, and now they wanted me gone. That was the last straw. I called a locksmith and changed the locks. Then I spent the rest of the weekend boxing up their things, every dress, every golf club, every piece of furniture they'd brought. I stored it all in the garage. By Monday, the house looked like it used to. My mother's photo was back in the hallway. Her vase sat proudly on the mantel. And I was ready for whatever came next. The week after I changed the locks, the house was quiet, peaceful. I started my new job at Wellington and Grove Financial, tucked into a sleek office building downtown. My desk had a view of the skyline, and my team welcomed me with genuine warmth. I buried myself in work spreadsheets, reports, client strategy meetings. I was good at it, and that felt like something to hold on to. But the calm at home was temporary. Friday evening, I pulled into the driveway and saw them. Dad, Vanessa, and Mia standing at the door with their luggage. Their smiles evaporated when they saw the new locks. Vanessa was the first to speak, loud and sharp. "What the hell did you do to our house?" I got out of the car, calm but already bracing myself. "Not your house," I said. "It never was." She laughed, but it sounded forced. "This is ridiculous. Open the door, Elena." "No." Dad stepped forward, eyes darting from me to Vanessa. "Sweetheart, let's not do this here." I turned to him slowly. "You mean in my driveway, in front of my house?" He shifted uncomfortably. Vanessa crossed her arms. "We just came back from a very expensive trip. Don't make this uglier than it has to be." I walked past them, unlocked the front door, and turned. "Your things are in the garage. Packed, labeled. You can take them and leave." Vanessa's eyes narrowed. "You think you can kick us out?" "I'm not kicking anyone out. I'm reclaiming my home. You knew whose name was on the deed, you just chose to pretend otherwise. She opened her mouth, but Dad cut in. Elena, please. Let's just talk. You had 4 years to talk, I said. Instead, you lied to your wife, let her believe she lived in a house you owned. And when she tried to throw me out, you stayed quiet. Mia stood to the side, her arms folded, saying nothing. Her face was unreadable. Vanessa glanced at Dad. Tell her she's being crazy, that she's overreacting. Dad looked down. She's not. That stunned her. For the first time, I saw something shift in Vanessa, like she wasn't entirely sure what world she was standing in. What she asked. She's not wrong, he repeated. It's Elena's house. It's always been hers. You lied to me, Vanessa hissed. I didn't know how to tell you, Dad mumbled. Vanessa spun around, eyes wide. Unbelievable. You lied to your wife for 4 years, and now you're just standing here letting your daughter lock us out like criminals. I didn't lock you out. I gave you a free place to live. I didn't owe you anything I said, but I tried. I let you stay. I kept quiet when you redecorated, when you moved Mom's things, when you treated me like a guest in my own home. She pointed a finger at me. You're ungrateful. I laughed. You went on a luxury vacation without even telling me, then called me a freeloader on the phone. You made it clear what you think of me, so now I'm showing you what I think of you. There was silence for a moment, only the sound of the wind and the click of Mia's suitcase handle as she rolled it toward the garage. They're all labeled, I said. Vanessa's boxes are near the front, Mia's in the middle, Dad's are in the back. Mia didn't look at me, she kept her head down. Vanessa didn't help carry a single thing. It took them 2 trips. 2 quiet, tense trips to fill their car. Vanessa muttered the whole time. Dad barely spoke. Mia looked like she wanted to disappear. As they loaded the last box, Vanessa turned to me one last time. You'll regret this. I looked at her without blinking. No, I don't think I will. They drove away without another word. That night I sat on the porch with a cup of tea watching the sunset. The sky burned orange and red over the rooftops. I breathed in the evening air, the silence of my home wrapping around me like a blanket. I didn't cry. I didn't feel triumphant either. I just felt free. Over the next few weeks, I threw myself deeper into work. My team started trusting me with big projects. I got invited to dinners, coffee breaks, even a weekend retreat. I found a rhythm. I started feeling settled. And at home, I made the house mine again. Not just mine on paper. I rearranged the furniture the way Mom used to like it. I put her photo back in the hallway. Repainted the kitchen in her favorite shade of soft green. Even planted marigolds in the backyard, her favorite flower. She would have liked that. But of course it wasn't over, not really. 2 weeks after they left, I got a text from Dad. A new number. Can we talk? I want to explain. I didn't reply. Then another a few days later. I messed up. Please, 1 coffee, 10 minutes. Still no response. And then came the letter. Typed, signed, like a formal apology. I failed you. I failed your mother. I failed to protect what she gave you, and instead I let someone else try to take it. I lied to keep the peace, but it cost me everything. If you never speak to me again, I'll understand. But I'll always be proud of you. I read it twice, folded it neatly, put it in my drawer. I didn't throw it out, but I didn't answer either. Some wounds don't heal with words. Some bridges don't rebuild with coffee, especially when they were never strong to begin with. I started getting fewer texts after that, fewer voicemails, fewer attempts to reach me. It was quiet again, peaceful again, and for once that felt right. It was autumn by the time the dust truly settled. The leaves turned amber and gold, the air crisp and full of change. I kept my mornings slow on weekends, coffee on the porch, sweater wrapped around my shoulders, watching the neighborhood breathe. The house, my mother's house, felt like home again. Not a shared space, not a compromise. Mine. I could feel her in the walls now, not Vanessa's perfume, or Mia's music, or Dad's half-sighed apologies. Just my mother's memory and my quiet rebuilding. I hadn't heard from them in weeks. No more messages, no more knock-knock texts from new numbers, just silence. And I was okay with that. Then one morning a letter arrived. Handwritten, no return address. I recognized the looping cursive immediately. Mia. Elena. I know I probably don't deserve to write this, but I hope you'll read it anyway. I didn't understand everything when it was happening. I thought you were just mad and Mom said you were being difficult, but now I see it wasn't that simple. You weren't angry, you were hurt. And I think I helped hurt you, and I'm really sorry. I miss our movie nights. I miss laughing in the kitchen. I didn't realize how fake some of that was for Mom, but it wasn't for me. You were the only one who ever listened to me like I mattered. I hope you're okay. I really do. She ended it with a drawing of a small sun like the ones she used to doodle in her school notebooks. I stared at the letter for a long time, folded it carefully, slipped it into the drawer next to Dad's letter. Maybe one day I'd write back. Maybe not. But for now, that was enough. A few weeks later, I stood in front of the community center holding a clipboard. I had volunteered to help organize a financial literacy class for young adults just one evening a week. It felt good offering what I knew to people who needed it, helping them understand how to open accounts, budget, avoid debt traps. Things my mom had quietly taught me when I was 16 while stirring stew and paying bills at the kitchen table. The same kitchen where Vanessa once told me I was a lazy freeloader. I smiled at the thought, not out of spite, but from the distance I now felt from that moment. Some things just lose their power. That night after class, Sarah from work texted, "Movie night at mine, bring snacks, and no spreadsheets, I swear." I laughed, tossed a bag of popcorn into my tote, and walked the 10 minutes to her apartment. The people in my life now, they weren't bound by guilt or blood or old roles. They were present, solid, people who saw me, not just what I could give. And I gave back, but this time it was by choice, not obligation. The holidays came and went. I didn't hear from Dad or Vanessa. But Mia sent another letter. This one was short. "Hope you're doing well. I made the honor roll. Thought you'd want to know." And she included a photo her standing next to a school bulletin board, grinning, holding a certificate. I put it on the fridge. My mother would have done the same. Then one evening, as winter began to thaw, I found myself back in the garden. The marigolds were long gone, but I had other seeds to plant now. I dug into the dirt, feeling the earth crumble in my hands. Familiar. Honest. As I worked, I heard footsteps behind me. I didn't turn around right away. I knew who it was. Dad. His voice was quiet. "You always did love the garden?" I stood slowly, met his eyes. He looked tired, older than I remembered. "I was hoping I could talk to you," he said. "I'm listening," I replied, brushing dirt from my hands. "I won't ask to come back. I know I don't deserve that. I wanted to say thank you for not losing who you are, even when I failed you." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out an envelope. "I finally transferred the deed," he said. "It should have been done years ago, but you don't need it now, do you? You always knew." I took it, just nodded. He turned to leave but paused. "Mia still talks about you. You mattered to her more than you know." Then he left. No hugs, no drama, just words left behind like seeds. That night I sat on the porch again. The stars were out, the wind was soft. I thought about my mother, about how she'd built this house, paid it off, fought through illness to make sure I had a place that no one could take from me. And I'd protected it, not just the walls and roof, but the life inside. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need apologies wrapped in excuses. I had the truth. I had peace. I had the soil and the space to plant something new. Story 3. Hey Reddit, I'm AmITheA. I'm 27 now, but this all started when I was 24, working ridiculous hours, juggling 2 lives like I was born for it. One life, the one my family thought they knew, the loyal daughter helping run our old school family textile business. The other life, the one they didn't see coming, I was the founder and CEO of a tech startup, quietly redefining how supply chains worked around the world. My startup was born out of frustration. Every time I pitched a tech upgrade to my dad at Linwood Fabrics, he'd shoot it down like it was poison. "We're a people business," he'd say. "We don't need software telling us how to run relationships." Cool. Except our relationships were tanking because our inventory was a mess, our deliveries late, and customer churn rising. So yeah, I started building my own solution. Nights, weekends, lunch breaks. My partner Nate, my best friend since we were awkward teenagers, and I coded our brains out until we had something that actually worked. We called it Threadline, and we kept it quiet. For 2 years, I showed up at Linwood in the morning, helped with sales and ops, then stayed up until 3 a.m. managing the real business mind. My father, James Linwood, treated the family company like a sacred inheritance, and my sister Cameron, she was the prodigy in his eyes. Always in the office, always saying the right things, always towing the "this is how it's always been" line. Me, I was just the one he expected to fill in the blanks. Do the busy work, look grateful. Then last year everything exploded. It started with a call from my dad, 7 a.m. No hello, no good morning. "Arya, where are those supplier forecasts?" The quarterly board meetings at 10. I was still in my apartment debugging a deployment with our team in Singapore. I minimized the Threadline dashboard, opened the Linwood spreadsheet, and lied through my teeth. "Just finishing them now. You'll have them in 15. He hung up without a word. Typical. Minutes later, a message popped up on my second phone, the one my family didn't know existed. Nate. Asia rollout is live. Congrats, boss. Take a nap someday, maybe. I smiled. This was real. This was mine. But then came the pressure. First, my mom Clara FaceTimed me. Full makeup, big earrings, zero warmth. Aria, you look exhausted. Have you been sleeping? You know how important breakfast is to your father. I lied again. Lost track of time working on projections. Well, at least you're committed to something. Your sister had to manage that buyer meeting alone, you know. Again. Right. Cameron the Saint. By the time I pulled up to the Linwood office, this dated brick box in a sea of modern towers, I was already tired of pretending. But the meeting was starting and I had to play the part. Cameron greeted me with a smug smile. There she is. Thought you got lost on the way to your job. I forced a laugh and sat down next to Aaron, our business advisor. He gave me this look like he could tell I wasn't all in. Maybe he knew. Maybe not. Dad launched into his speech about tradition and market trust, while Cameron chimed in like a corporate echo. Then he turned to me. Aria, let's see the projections. I plugged in my laptop and showed them a cleaned-up version of what Threadline had predicted. Safe numbers good enough to please nothing, that hinted I'd already fixed half the company's problems behind the scenes with software they refused to use. Cameron raised an eyebrow. These forecasts seem optimistic. What's your basis? My other phone buzzed. It was Harper, our Series B lead investor at Threadline. I didn't answer. Couldn't. Asian markets, I replied. Plus, if we roll out the digital logistics system I've been working on. Dad cut me off with a groan. Not this again. We've built this business on handshakes and follow-through, not screens. I gritted my teeth. Meanwhile, Threadline, my tech hobby, was pulling in 6 figures a month and quietly keeping Linwood from collapsing. The meeting ended, but Harper kept calling. I excused myself and finally answered. Aria, we've got investors ready to go. They want a live meeting tomorrow. My stomach flipped. I can't just disappear. Your dad doesn't know what he's standing on. Either you claim this now or let the moment pass. It's time. Later that night, Dad called another emergency family meeting in his office. Cameron was already there, practically glowing. We've decided, he said. It's time to talk about succession. My heart pounded. It was happening. Aria, I've seen a change in you. You're more focused. I want you to take over as director of operations. Cameron flinched. I didn't. That's unexpected, I said. Earn it. Prove you're ready. Show us your plan for the next quarter. The board will vote in 3 days. Deal. I replied, calm on the outside. Inside, absolute chaos. Because Harper's investors wanted to announce our funding round that same day. Because Threadline was finally ready for the world. And because I was done playing the background daughter in someone else's legacy. Cameron tried to catch me afterward. Whatever you're planning, don't make this about you. Don't embarrass the family. No worries, I smiled. See you at the board meeting. I left the building with Nate on the line. How did it go? They gave me 3 days to pitch a vision. You gonna show them what you've built? Every line of code. You think they're ready? They don't have a choice. 3 days, that's what I had. 3 days to decide how honest I wanted to be. 3 days to either play the obedient daughter or reveal the empire I'd already built right under their noses. That night, I barely slept. Between my family's expectations and Threadline's looming investor announcement, my brain was on overdrive. At 4:00 a.m., I was back at my laptop stitching together the biggest presentation of my life. Every chart, every number, every achievement they'd unknowingly benefited from was going into it. But there was one wild card, Aaron, our business consultant. He'd always been sharp, always watching. I had a feeling he knew something was off. I didn't know if he was a threat or an ally. The next morning, Linwood's factory had a fire drill level emergency. A shipment was misrouted and a major retailer, Wellington Stores, was threatening to pull their entire account. Cameron was in full panic mode, pacing and yelling on speakerphone like she was auditioning for a reality show. We need a fix now or we're losing 30% of this quarter's revenue. Dad turned to me desperate. Can you run some numbers? Maybe find a workaround? I said nothing, just opened my laptop and quietly launched Threadline's dashboard. In seconds, it flagged the problem and mapped out a reroute with supplier backup. I slid the plan across the table. Done. Cameron grabbed it, blinking at the detail. Wait, where did this come from? I've been testing a predictive logistics model, I said, keeping it vague. More of your tech obsession, she snapped. Call it that if you want. It just saved your client. That shut her up for once. As soon as the crisis cooled off, I ducked into a side office to join a call with Harper and the Threadline team. Everything okay over there? Harper asked. Define okay. I'm still playing pretend. Investors are ready. They want a public announcement within 24 hours. Then let's make it big, I said. We'll announce the funding right after the Linwood board meeting. You sure you want to do both the same day? Yes. I want them all in the room when they find out who really built this company's future. The next 2 days were a blur of coffee spreadsheets and calls to Nate, who was holding down the fort at Threadline. I barely saw my parents, but Cameron cornered me in the copy room on day 2. Whatever stunt you're planning, don't forget this is our family's company, she hissed. You think you can waltz in with a few slides and steal it? I'm not stealing anything, I replied. I'm offering to save it. From what you? She stormed off before I could answer. But I already had the answer, from themselves. The morning of the board meeting arrived. I wore black. Not to be dramatic, it just felt right. Simple, sharp, unapologetic. I arrived early, plugged in my laptop, and watched the room fill with familiar faces. Dad arms crossed like he was already disappointed. Mom pretending not to look nervous. Cameron icy as ever. Aaron quiet and unreadable. And a few board members who honestly hadn't paid attention since 1999. Then Harper walked in. Not with the investors, but as herself. You sure about this? She whispered as she passed. 100%. Dad stood and cleared his throat. Thank you all for being here. Today's a milestone. We're considering elevating my daughter Aria into a formal leadership role. She's prepared a strategic proposal. He nodded at me to begin. I stood up, heart thudding like a drumline, and pulled up my slides. Before I talk about the future, let's talk about the present. Slide 1, real numbers. Supply chain inefficiencies. Client retention issues. Margin bleed. Eyes started widening. Now here's how those numbers looked after implementing my pilot system. Slide 2, clean graphs, rising profits, stabilized costs. What you're seeing isn't theory. It's what I've already done. Quietly, behind the scenes. Cameron sat up straighter. Wait, what system? A platform I developed 2 years ago. Threadline. Slide 3, the logo. A sleek interface. Live metrics. Murmurs rippled across the room. I've used it to monitor vendor reliability, flag risk in shipments, and automate order reroutes, including the Wellington disaster avoided in under 5 minutes. I turned toward my father. Everything you thought was just coincidence, that was Threadline. You're telling me? He looked stunned. This software has been running our operations? The parts I could access, yes, but now I'm offering more. I clicked to the next slide. We just closed a Series B funding round. We're valued at $150 million. Our investors want us to expand, and I want Linwood to be our first legacy partner. Harper stood and addressed the board. Threadline is revolutionizing B2B logistics. Aria is one of the smartest founders I've ever worked with. You're lucky she's offering you a seat at her table. Silence, shock, disbelief. Then Cameron broke it. This is betrayal. You built a company in secret. No, I said calmly. I built a solution you ignored. Aaron, the consultant, finally spoke. I've been reviewing her software. It's real. It works. And without it, your company would have been deep in the red. We would have failed, he added bluntly. Dad looked like someone had punched the air out of him. Why didn't you tell me? You never listened. Mom's voice cracked. Aria, this isn't what we expected of you. No, I said. You expected me to sit down, be grateful, and wait my turn. But I didn't. I built something better. I paused, then looked each board member in the eye. I'm not here to take over Linwood. I'm here to give it a future. I ended with the deal terms. Threadline would integrate fully with Linwood as a strategic partner. Linwood would retain branding staff and control of operations, but with modern tools, real-time analytics, and a back-end that actually worked. In exchange, I wanted a board-seat tech authority and equity in Linwood going forward. Cameron started to protest again, but Dad raised a hand. Enough. He stared at the screen one last time, then turned to me. And if we say no, then I unplug Threadline today, I said. And you see how fast your systems crumble. He looked down at the papers, thought for a long moment. You did all this while working here. I didn't want to destroy Linwood, Dad. I wanted to save it. In the end, he said yes. He signed the partnership papers in front of the board, hands shaking. Mom didn't speak. Cameron just left the room. But I stayed. I'd waited years for this, for them to finally see me. For once, I wasn't just the daughter. I was the one in control. It's wild how quiet success can feel. No parades, no champagne. Just me, Harper, and Reed sitting in my startup's glass-walled conference room staring at our signed merger contracts. Threadline and Linwood Textiles, legacy and innovation, finally together. But just as the ink dried, I got a text from Cameron. We need to talk, alone. I didn't reply right away. Honestly, I was still riding the aftershock of the boardroom meeting. My dad had seen the full scope of what I'd built. My mom hadn't spoken a word since, just dabbed her eyes like the truth physically hurt. Cameron, though. She walked out before the vote even happened. No goodbye, no fight, just silence. 2 days later we met. Neutral ground, a cafe on the edge of downtown. We hadn't picked it together, but somehow we both ended up there early. She was already seated, espresso untouched, watching traffic like she expected it to crash through the window. "You brought the empire down," she said as soon as I sat. It wasn't an empire, it was a machine stuck in reverse. She didn't argue. Instead, she looked me in the eye, really looked. "I hated you for it," she said, "but I couldn't stop thinking, you didn't do it to win. You did it because we were losing." I stayed quiet. She wasn't wrong, so she continued. "What happens now? You stay COO. You lead Linwood's operations like you always have, but now you've got tools that don't lie to you. And you, I run Threadline, I focus on scaling clients dev, but Linwood is our anchor account." She stared at me, a flicker of emotion cracking through her practiced calm. "Dad's proud of you, you know. He hasn't said much. He doesn't know how. But he is." Cameron leaned back in her chair and for the first time in years, let her shoulders drop. "I thought I had to protect the company from you. Turns out I needed to protect it with you." The following weeks blurred into a storm of press interviews, product demos, and contract signings. Threadline went from a stealth startup to an industry leader overnight. But the most surreal moment, walking into Linwood's new innovation lab named the Clayton Harper Center, funded jointly by our investors and the Old Family Trust. Harper had insisted on the name. I wasn't sure how to feel about it. "You earned it," she said when I protested. "Your family finally joined the 21st century because of you." Still, I preferred being behind the code. Reed, of course, handled the social side of it all. He was at every event, every investor dinner, charming everyone. Even my mom, who now referred to him as our tech son-in-law despite us not being anything remotely close to that. "You're enjoying this way too much," I teased him after one particularly stuffy gala. "You gave them something to believe in," he said, "even if it took an ambush to get there." He wasn't wrong. It did feel like a revolution. A clean, controlled one, but still a revolution. But success has a way of attracting shadows. And a few weeks in, one came knocking. I was reviewing a new supplier dashboard when I got an internal alert: multiple unauthorized login attempts detected. I froze. Our systems were secure, military grade. Only 6 people had access to the admin panel. I ran a trace. It came from inside Linwood. More specifically, Cameron's old assistant's workstation. I took the elevator straight to her office. "Wasn't me," she said immediately, even before I asked. "I know," I said, "but someone used your credentials." We pulled security logs. Turns out an old IT contractor Cameron had vouched for had retained partial back-end access. He'd tried to clone part of Threadline's codebase. Corporate espionage. Classic. "You think this was internal sabotage?" Cameron asked. "No. This wasn't personal. It was industrial theft. Someone else wants our edge." We reported it, secured the system, and initiated legal proceedings. But it served as a harsh reminder the world now knew what we'd built. And they wanted it. The next month brought a full-circle moment. We landed a global logistics contract with one of the largest manufacturing conglomerates in Europe. Harper called me at 11 p.m. "We just went global, Aria. You realize that?" I didn't respond right away. I was sitting in Mom's backyard laptop on my knees under the same maple tree where I used to do homework as a kid. The irony wasn't lost on me. "Aria?" Harper asked again. "Yeah," I said finally. "I realize it." I didn't cry. Not from joy, not from pressure. But my throat tightened in a way that felt like closure. At our next family dinner, Dad clinked his glass awkwardly. To Aria, he said, "Who showed us that tradition and technology don't have to fight?" Mom raised hers too. And to Reed, she added, "Who taught me how to back up my photos?" Everyone laughed, but I saw the pride in their eyes. Even Cameron, maybe especially her. A few days later, I found myself alone in the Threadline office late at night, running some post-integration checks. Just me, the hum of machines, and the glow of my screen. Reed appeared in the doorway with 2 coffees. "How does it feel?" he asked. "Like I didn't break the rules," I said. "I just rewrote them." He smiled. "You didn't take over your family's business. You built your own and made them better by inviting them in." I looked out the window at the skyline glowing with opportunity. "They always wanted me to wait my turn," I said. "But I wasn't waiting for permission. I was building proof. And now I'm done proving anything. Because at the end of the day, I didn't steal the throne. I built something bigger. And I didn't just invite my family in, I showed them how to rise with me." Somewhere along the line, this stopped being about revenge or validation. It became about evolution, about leading, and finally, about peace. Not silence, not suppression, real peace. The kind you earn when you know exactly who you are and you no longer need anyone's permission to live it out loud. And if they still don't get it, well, that's their loss. I'm already on to the next build.